Welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the Five Reasons YouTube channel. Also, make sure you subscribe to Off the Floor. That's our Discord server, $2.99 per month. Click on the link in the description. You'll bypass the Apple upcharge. It's a place for the most heat, information, conversation, consternation, celebration, now that they're on a 5-game winning streak. So check it out. It is Off the Floor, link right here in the description. Also check out a great sponsor of the Five Reasons Sports Network, including Prize Picks. Use the code 5 FIVE, put down $5. You get $50 to play right away. Prize Picks legal in the state of Florida again, and they've added back most of the features that they had before. So check it out. It's prizepicks.com, but make sure to get your $50. Use the code FIVE. And now, today's episode.
Mercy, luxurious, Heat Nation, yeah, Mercy and Lago, down to Biscayne, yeah, five on the floor, ride for my dogs, where here's the thing, you can check the score, hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs, down to Biscayne. Kept the flow playing, got it all band. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the Five Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
All right, welcome back to Five on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick at 5 Reasons Sports. We got Alex Toledo. You can follow him at Tropical Blanket. The Miami Heat are on a 5-game winning streak following a 10-game losing streak. I want to credit one of our listeners, familiar. If you've been to space, you probably know him. Marcus Schultz, a DJ who follows the podcast here regularly, was actually just here for Miami Music Week, and he actually pointed out to me that the only team to have a 10-game winning streak and then a 10-game losing streak in the same season was the Phoenix Suns. So that was after Barkley was traded. So you're going back to the 90s. We'll see if the Heat can make it 10 in a row. I'm looking at the schedule, and I don't think so, because they're going to be they go next to Boston, then they get Memphis at home, Milwaukee at home. Though of course Memphis just had a coaching change, and Milwaukee is without Dame Lillard. But today we're going to talk about something specific, Alex and I, with this team, because there are some things that they're doing right now, the Heat are doing right now, that they have to, like Duncan Robinson being out, so Alec Burks has taken his place in the starting lineup, and he's played very well. But there's other things that Eric Spoelstra is doing because he wants to. And the thing that he has decided to do is play Pelle Larsson and play him ahead of Jaime Jaquez. And he even started him in this game against Washington. And Jaime actually had one of his better games, although against Washington, it's hard to know what you're really looking at. But Larsson has now played he played in the Golden State game. He played in the Atlanta game. And then just 4 minutes and 7 minutes. But he got 30 minutes against Philadelphia, again, a tanking team, 30 minutes against Washington, another tanking team. But he put up good numbers in both, 14, 6, and 4, and then 15, 7, and 5. He had 4 steals in the game against Philadelphia. He didn't make his threes in this game against Washington, but he did make a couple of them against Philadelphia, and he has shot 12 of 24 overall, so 50% over these 2 games. How do you read into this? Because I know they've got some people out. And Rozier played against Washington. He played well, but again, that's kind of by necessity because Davion Mitchell was out. But what do you make of the fact that he's looking to Larsson this late in the year when, we've talked about play the kids because, you're really not anything to lose. I mean, you're probably going to be the 9 or 10 seed anyway. But the fact that he's doing it, we know that he doesn't take anything for granted and he's trying to win all these games. What do you see here?
Well, I just think it's a guy who knows how to play his role and is has frankly just been more effective than what Jaquez has shown for most of the season as far as playing the role. Because I think most people, would be, can agree that Jaquez is somebody who, with his rookie season flashed, more individual scoring prowess right? Like somebody who you thought like, and including myself, could give you, reliable a reliable amount of paint touches and post work every night and kind of create from there. They haven't really gone to that much since kind of the second half of last season after they acquired Terry. I'm not trying to blame it all on him. It's just they were adding another shot creator, and I feel like once they went away from it, they didn't really go back much to it. Of course, there's the stuff that we've talked about this season with the counters and playing rushed. Like all these things are factors. I feel like once his role kind of went down, he's kind of like trying to like overcompensate at times and play like off the wing into a post touch, and it's contested and teams know like what he wants to go to. The Jaime thing has just been very inconsistent. I still like some of the stuff he brings. Like he can do some of the hustle stuff. He can play like okay defense and sometimes be a good cutter. The thing is, Larsson has just been better at it. Since Jaime is not giving you that offensive production, the paint touches and the efficiency in the paint, right? Finishing there this season like he was last year, it's about the other things. And frankly, Larsson has just been better at it as a rookie. Now, of course, Larsson is an older rookie, right? We knew before the season, just looking at him in the way that he played, very rugged player, NBA body, like was ready to play. And he even though he's been disappointing as a shooter, I frankly just don't trust the three. Like he might hit one every other night. That's something that I think can be fixed into being passable. I don't think it's something that's broken. And Jaime's just not been a good shooter either. So when it comes down to it, you're looking at, most importantly, the defense and the cutting. And Larsson has been great at both. I think Larsson still has a little bit of a ways to go as far as balancing the physicality. Some of it is the rookie stuff, right? But he gets foul calls, right? Going against him, I should say, not like drawing fouls. And I think he's got to be careful there, but he's obviously a very physical defender, likes to fight over the screens. And I really like what he's doing there. And as a cutter, he's fantastic. You saw it tonight. There was so many of those. They ended up having, their net rating was like 10 points per 100 possessions better tonight with him on the floor than it wasn't. And looking at it, like it was a staggering difference on offense. Their offensive rating was actually much better with him on the floor tonight. Of course, this is just a 1-game sample size, but you saw it like, with this, ever since he's been a starter, you're seeing a little bit more of what he can do. Now, I just think, whenever they're healthy again, he's going to go back to that smaller role and you're not going to hear much about him anymore. Just to be honest, like I think he's going to have a smaller, just in general, less minutes, smaller role. But we know kind of like what he's good at and what he has to work on.
Let's get to the hockey as part of this after the break, but I want to stay with Larsson here. You mentioned about the getting used to the physicality, foul calls. I remember him guarding DeRozan, which was like his first extended playing time, and kind of complaining that you couldn't touch him, that he gets every call. But it's like he thought he should get those calls. That's the thing. Like he plays with a certain physicality. He's got an edge to him, for sure, and he's not afraid of anybody. I know it's an easy comparison to make here, but I saw some Dragic in him, and then we talked to him about that, and he talked about how Goran had basically greeted him, went to one of his games, and obviously Goran's been around the organization a lot lately, and I expect him to be part of the organization next year. I think that's the way that this is trending.
Aggregate it.
Well, I mean, I talked to Goran last year, and he said he wanted 1 year to kind of get his life where he wanted it, and then probably want to be with the Heat organization. And you see him everywhere now. He's doing community events and all that. But he does play with that edge that I like, and I think they need. But I'm interested that you say we were not going to see him much more. Let's look at what their rotation is, okay, right now. They're wham, where and bam. They've leaned into it. Okay, I don't see him pulling Kalel from the starting lineup at this point. Obviously, Tyler's going to start. Wiggins is going to start, provided he plays. The only disappointment with Wiggins so far has been his availability. He's been less available than Jimmy, which that's something to monitor here going forward. But when he's available, he'll start. And then it appeared that they were leaning into Duncan as the other starter to give them some space. But now Duncan has a different back injury than he had last year. And Burks is giving them that space, not in the same way Duncan does, because he doesn't run around, but he's basically, he's a knockdown shooter from basically the corners and the elbows from three. And it looks like they've committed to this at least until Jovic is back, to this 3-man group off the bench of Mitchell, Highsmith, and Kyle Anderson. You don't see a world, and again, I know Jovic affects this because Jovic might take Kyle Anderson's minutes. We'll see what happens there. Although I feel like Spo's kind of falling in love with Kyle Anderson, so maybe not. But like the ninth, you don't see him playing a ninth because it feels to me like he would be the ninth. I mean, if Duncan comes back, then Burks probably goes back to the very end of the bench. Feels like a James Jones situation actually from way back. You don't see him getting minutes for Larsson as a ninth. I'm not even including Rozier and Jaquez right now. I'm just saying right now him playing 9.
Well, that's the thing. I do still think he can play if he's willing to play 9 or even 10. I think they have the guys for it when they're healthy, of course, like when Wiggins and if Duncan or Jovic are back soon, right? Like I think they have enough to go 10 right now without Wiggins, without Duncan, without Jovic. I understand why he's cutting the rotation short, but yeah, I think Pelle should play like those 9th man type of minutes. I just meant more like he's not going to have this featured role where he's playing with the starters and playing so many minutes. But I do think he's earned himself a spot, and I do think like, just frankly, Terry and Jaquez have, they've lost their spot as far as consistent rotation players. That's why you didn't really see them play until tonight. And last game he came in with the G Leaguers. It's just unfortunate because I'm pretty sure there was a pod we did last summer where I said, Terry and Jaime, like I was expecting them to be like 2 of their 5 best players.
Right.
Yeah, I'm 90% sure we did some pod where we
did. I think we all said that though. I think I thought Jovic would be ahead of Jaquez, but I'm
not even trying to do the blame game stuff because we've done so much.
No,
I mean, it's been done all season, but it's just true. Like Terry and Jaquez, have just been, the 2 guys who just did not live up to the standards. And I think Larsson is now kind of on the is a beneficiary of this. And by the way, I mentioned like the stuff he's been really good at throughout the season, but tonight, like 5 assists, 7 rebounds. And I also should have mentioned like, and I know this comparison was made, I think by Brady, by Lou from Miami Heat beat and others, if I remember correctly at the time when they picked up Pelle, that he's got a lot of Caleb to him. And I completely see it. Yeah. It's been there all season, not only as a cutter, not only as a defender, even though I would say Pelle is more physical, is as a straight line driver off the catch. I see a lot of like Caleb was once he gets to the rim is a much more like acrobatic finisher. Like you will never see Pelle go for some of those layups that Caleb was going for at times. But as far as playing off the catch and driving straight, like he reminds me of him there as well. Just like being good at that part of the game. It's just kind of an unheralded aspect of the game. But he has great spatial awareness. A lot of times teams are sagging off of him, and it's not just about knowing, okay, there's space there. It's about knowing when to cut. And I feel like Pelle is good at that as a rookie, which is pretty impressive, right? Like he knows that there's space there, and he cuts when it isn't, other guys taking up space in the paint. Like I think he's already, got a sixth sense for that and how to use players, leaving him open against them. Now it's at some point he's got to improve the shot. And I think there is, like I mentioned, hope for that. But the stuff that he's doing now, it's like, those are clear aspects of the game that he's a positive at already.
Yeah, on the other side of this, we're going to get into long-term future stuff. Because I know it's prisoner of the moment, maybe recency bias, but I was surprised by how lopsided these polls were. And I'll just get to what the question is. It was who do you think has a better long-term future in the NBA? And when I polled it on Off the Floor and on Twitter, it was about 75% Larsson, 25% Jaquez. So we'll get into that on the other side of the break. Before we do, a word from Cousins USA.
And now it's time for Who's on the Move, sponsored by our friends over at Cousins USA Moving and Storage, family owned and operated since 1996. They can service both residential and commercial moves, whether you're going across town, across the state, across country, and even across the globe. They have a 15,000 square foot private warehouse in Lauderhill, Broward County. The number one priority for Cousins Moving is transparency and being honest with their customers. They have a very low turnover, with most of their movers working for them for over 10 years. So find them online at Cousins Moving on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, or visit the website at www.cousinsusa.com/5RSN. They've got an exclusive offer through 5RSN. You get 5 free wardrobe boxes with your next move, so there's no need to pack your clothes away in suitcases. Just mention 5 reasons. And now, who's on the move?
Well, Jaime Jaquez has been on the move to the end of the bench. Again, played better tonight.
And now it's time for Who's on the Move, sponsored by our friends over at Cousins USA.
Well, there we go. You know, I did that the other day when I was producing, but I didn't think you
I
would.
saw it. It gives me a kick every time, and I don't think I've ever done it, so it's hilarious now. Like
I did it twice with Brady the other day. By the way, check out the post game pod that Brady did with Greg. We made an executive decision here that there was no reason for all 4 of us to be on a Heat versus Washington pod. So you'll be seeing more of these 2-person pods coming up here towards the end of the season. All right, Jaquez, Larsson, their futures 75%. And it was not a small sample size, like 2,500 votes over the 2 platforms. 75% said Larsson has the better NBA future. I mean, Jaime was first team all rookie last year. Larsson is just getting minutes towards the end of his rookie season. They're both oldish rookies, or were oldish rookies. Do you agree with that assessment?
Oh, I don't know, man. It's a tough question. Got to lean into the character. A tough question, but I do think it is tough because I guess it depends on how much you believe that Jaime can get back to the level of effectiveness he had as a rookie, right? And if you're striving, I mean, the sophomore slumps happen, but it's not always going to sound great when you're talking about striving to be where you were as a rookie, right? Like I get it, that doesn't sound great, but he was very effective. So that's why I say that. Like you mentioned, it was like if you would have told me after last season that we're talking about, you would have just presented that poll information to me by the end of this season, right? Compared to last season, like I would have said, wow, Pelle must have had a great rookie season, like amazing rookie season. He must have been, a clear-cut all-rookie second-team guy at worst. And no, like Pelle's been nice, but that's not been the case. Jaime's just been very disappointing, and it's not just eye test stuff. It's not just like everything we were already talking about. It's when you look at the stats, it's not good. Like they're almost a -7 net with him on this year versus with him off. And when you break that down, it's almost just as bad on both ends of the floor. Whereas like their defense allows 6 more points per 100 possessions when he's on compared to when he's off. And the offense is 4 points worse per 100 possessions when he's on. So he's just not like you kind of mentioned, like Pelle's just been more effective. And, when you compare it to his stats this season, the on-off stuff, understanding that Jaquez has had more minutes, their defense gets 3 or 4 points better with him on the floor. The offense stays about the same, but they're a positive 2 point something, net rating, as opposed to, like I mentioned, a -7 net with Jaime. Like Pelle's just been more effective, even with the shooting concerns. Like I mentioned, he's just been better at playing the role. And that's where it's like, how much of this do you buy into going forward? Where it's like, do you just take the stability of knowing what Pelle is and isn't, and hoping that maybe the shooting will come around and you'll be a fine catch and shoot player, or do you take kind of the the question mark, the Pandora's box, kind of like the deal or no deal type of thing with Jaime in his game, where it's like you might get a guy who can give you some real scoring and be that 6th man that maybe that I and some others thought he could be for them this season, and be okay on both ends. Like, and all of this is to say, I still don't really have a strong answer either way. I guess just off of right now, I would say Pelle like is the safer answer.
I think it's the safer answer. I think that what's interesting is the whole deal with Jaquez was, well, you didn't know how high his upside was, right? Like that he hit his ceiling. But the only reason I would even say Jaquez at this point is there may be more upside there. which is a weird kind of twist for me because I feel like he can be a scorer, but there's been no second act from him. Like he came into the season saying, when we knockdown shooter, lockdown defender. Well, actually, the defensive numbers, I know what the ones you're looking at, some of the field goal percentage numbers against are good for him. I know people have pointed it out, but he's not
Yeah, but
a stand in the corner, make a three type guy, and he's been in that role a lot. But then he's also been loose with the ball when he's handled the ball. He's been loose with the ball. He doesn't have another move. We identified it like the second month last year. Like, if he loses that, if they catch onto that spin move, what's he going to go to? I can't believe they have that. They haven't. I'm assuming they've worked with him on this. There's been nothing. There's been no development
he
from
can't
him
be
in
that
that
guy that they
regard.
want him to be this year. He's just not, like you
Yeah,
said, he's not a catch and shoot only type of
yeah,
guy. And then, like you mentioned, since his drives to the rim have kind of been neutralized, it's like he's not giving you much on either end. And just to clear up, like the defensive field goal percentage stats that have been around him all season,
yeah.
the stats guys like John Jablanca, shout out him, will tell you that those stats are like flawed because of the way that the NBA
Right.
counts them. Like if you go and look at the videos like one by one, like you'll see like, oh, like a guy was given
He was
credit
in the
for a
area,
stop
right?
when he wasn't even
Right,
like guarding him. So,
right.
but either way, like I do think Jaime can be an okay defender and has shown that. But I don't think he's as good as those stats paint him out to be, especially when you look at the on-off data. Like the defense getting 6 points worse is staggering.
Yeah,
Like, I don't try to
yeah.
only use on-off data, but that is just like that's hard to look past, you know.
Well, I also think part of the problem is he's been stapled to Terry a lot this year,
And
which
yeah,
I that is
100%.
that has not helped. And I thought that hurt Jovic also earlier in the season. I just don't know that. I don't know. I don't know that he's going to find that role here because the whole idea was when Jimmy was out, then Jaime was going to do some of those
You
things,
remember
but we
that?
had right. But
He used to be the
Jimmy's been out a
fill-in
lot,
Jimmy as a rookie. He
right?
was a fill-in.
Jimmy, I remember the game in Sacramento. He had as a rookie. Well, Jimmy's been out. Jimmy's still out. And
Yeah.
there's really is not. The one thing I will say about this though, because the question is. Oh, so let me pose this to you. You're gonna tell me this is a tough question, but we'll
By the
close
way,
with
before
this.
you get to the question, really, really
Yes.
quickly, he, the Heat are a -6 net with Jaime on and Terry off. So even once you
Okay.
take
Yeah.
Terry out of the minutes,
I was trying to be kind here.
no,
Okay,
I
let me
get
ask
you,
you
but
this
it was
question:
just
Is
like
is
just to
there is
point
there
how bad it's been, you
in
know?
in their current build? Is there room for both of them in their current? Assuming Tyler's going to be here, which is a safe assumption. I mean, I will see what kind of extension they offer him. But assuming Tyler's going to be here, and we don't know about Davion Mitchell yet. Duncan has a partial guarantee coming up this season. They almost traded him last summer. Maybe they trade him this summer. And Burks is on a 1-year contract, and I'd like them to bring him back if they can get him back for the minimum because he's been a good vet. But do you think there's room for both?
I do if you try to get Jaime back into, a role that optimizes his strengths. Because I do think
Mhm.
having him in a similar role to what Pella is doing is not ideal. Now, I'm not saying it's going to fix everything. It's going to magically have him, have the right counters. But I do just think in general, like, play to your player's strengths. I don't think he is even a below average player when it comes to playing that role. He's just not a good enough, 3-point shooter, and the drives off the catch have just not been effective. I think they got to find a way to get him some mid post touches. I'm not saying run the entire offense around him, when he's on the floor, but just get him some, get him a couple, when he's on the floor, because I do think he can create out of there. And I think if you give him those reps, he can, develop some counters, and he's shown that he can be adequate there. But him as a driver and as a catch and shoot guy, it's just not there. So if you can find a way to get him into a better role for himself, and of course he still has to work on these things. I'm not trying to bail him out for not being a good shooter and not being a great driver this season, but I think that's a place to start. And I think you can, because if you can get him back to that level of effectiveness in a role that's better for him, then I think you can have space for both of them because they're playing different roles. But if you're just going to keep having it, if you're going to keep, running into the wall with trying to run him like Larsson, then I
Yeah.
don't think there's room. I think Pella's going to win out
So here's how I
until
would
Jaime
rank
improves, by the way.
here's how I would rank their young guys at the moment in terms of their long-term futures. I think Ware is first. I think that's been pretty. I'm taking Tyler out of the equation because he's an all-star at this point. I don't consider him to be a young player. Same with Bam. I think it's Ware. Jovic, Larsson, Jaquez right now at the moment. Not saying that can't change, but I think that's where it is. And they have a decision to make on Jovic because of availability and some fit concerns. But I've seen more from Nico this year than I've seen from Jaime. And then look, they've got some other players. I mean, I want to see more Keyshawn Johnson, honestly, of the developmental guys they got. To me, that's still the one that I think there's a role for, and maybe that role emerges if maybe they trade Haywood in the last year of his contract too, which is also a possibility. I think that's where Keyshawn might get the opportunity. I will say this though, they were going to resign Caleb even after, right? Because that was after the draft. They were going to re-sign Caleb for a lot of money. Already having Jaquez on the roster, already having Larsson on the roster. So it feels like they just
Haywood.
want to stockpile and Haywood on the roster, right? And they still had Jimmy. So it does feel like they are okay stockpiling wings. But I'm with you. They have to find a role for Jaime that works, even if it's a low minute role, but they feature him more. But this thing about trying to plug him in, and again, this is another place where this is flipped. We viewed him as a plug and play player last year. He's not. He's not because you can't put him where other guys are dominating the ball and expect him to be effective. It's just not. He's just not a good enough three-point shooter. They don't respect him.
Athletic as last year either, and also the cuts not really
Yeah.
there much this season.
No,
Like he was
no, that's what's jumped out to me about Larsson because
year.
you mentioned Larson's a much better cutter. Jaime was a good cutter last year.
Yeah.
But that's not happening. And I just think they need to do a total retool of his game. And I just hope it's not. And maybe for Jaime, this wouldn't be so bad because Kendrick Nunn just signed the largest contract in the European League. The largest contract. But it feels a little Kendrick Nunnish to me, where a guy like jumps out on the league and then they adjust, and he never really adjusted back. Different kind of player, but in some ways the same because it was kind of Kendrick was kind of a one-trick pony, but once they knew he wasn't
right there. No disrespect to him because he's like Steph Curry over there.
No, he is. He's in the perfect place, but everybody knows Kendrick wasn't going to pass. You run the pick and roll, and it's like once they realized he wasn't passing, that was the end of it. And there was really, and then he got hurt when he went to LA and all the rest of it. But look, I hope Jaime figures it out because he was a really appealing player last year and looked great this summer. I heard he was the second best player. I heard this from many people, media people talking to the coaches out there. It's the second best player on the U.S. select team behind Cooper Flagg. And that team included Brandon Miller, okay, and some other core players. It hasn't worked out this year. All right, Alex, appreciate it. Check out our sponsors, cousinsusa.com/5RSN. Prize Picks, use the code FIVE. We'll have coverage of the Celtics and Grizzlies games coming up this week. Looks like everything's pointing to that game in Chicago. Probably going to decide a play-in spot. Which play-in spot, anyway. Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to the Five on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.